Jenna, I think what we've seen out of this Brooklyn team and organization is a level of consistency in what their priority is. And their priority is trying to get healthy. And this, to me, was another aspect of it. You heard what Steve Nash had to say after the game, and even throughout the course of the broadcast down the end. I brought up the fact that I was curious if we would see Kyrie Irving come back in the game. But I think you look at a couple points with this. One, at that 8.5-minute mark when he came out, Alize Johnson gave a foul to get Kyrie Irving out of the game. It was very clear down by 22 that Kyrie Irving and the Nets felt like he was done with the night, in particular after having been off the last couple of days, played 33 minutes, and things changed. The 21-2 run that the Nets went on, I think, started to make you wonder if Kyrie would go back in. But you see the body language, you see just the mindset. It didn't look like Kyrie Irving was going to be re-entering this game. And give credit to that Nets group. No. They got them back in the game, because this is the thing. And Nick, I know you know this. Brandon, you know this. All of it. When you are looking at trying to get your team ready for a title contention, a lot of circumstances like this, high leverage moments for some of these role and complementary players, they're important. We put so much value on experience. And to me, this was an opportunity for some of these guys to try and get some of that experience. And big picture wise, this Nets team that is still trying to get healthy. It wasn't just about one game. It's not just about the one seed. It's about making sure that down the stretch run, they're doing everything they can to try and maintain the health of these guys.
Well, okay, I respect and appreciate that. And if it's about experience, then bully for the Nets, because they're going to get a lot of very important playoff experience now when in round 2 they're facing the Bucks instead of potentially in round 2 facing the Hornets. So yeah, they'll get a lot of experience in a series that now is losable, because no one, I know Heat fans will get mad at me, nobody can beat the Nets out of the East except for 2 teams. Philly and Milwaukee can. Now, even if Brandon and Sarah believe they won't, I think everyone acknowledges they can. It's possible. You don't want to have to play them both. And the Nets have essentially opted in now to playing them both. This is a 2-game swing in the standings, because one team gets a win, one team gets a loss, and it's the tiebreaker. And to me, Steve, listen, there is a reason that experience as a coach tends to matter. I know Steve Kerr, in his instant success, followed by Ty Lue and followed by Nick Nurse's instant success, made us think it doesn't. But historically, coaching experience matters. And I would argue Steve Nash had his first bad week as the Nets head coach. I thought if you knew you could only play Durant in one of the 2 games, Minnesota, who you could beat without any of your stars anyway, or Philly, you play him against Philly. And in this game, everyone's pointing to when it got to 3. Well, it got to 12 with 4.5 minutes left, and Simmons and Embiid checked back in. When that happens, Kyrie's supposed to follow, and you're supposed to try to steal that game. So listen, Nash has done a nice job, and he's been dealt a difficult hand because of all the things he's had to deal with to go along with a super talented team. But I don't think you can say that he's handled what I consider to be their biggest game of the season properly in not having Durant available and then opting against playing Kyrie at the end, Brandon. I think it's going to hurt them in the playoff seeding.
Well, let's think about it this way, Nick. At the end, if they're standing and they're champions, will we be talking about the decisions that Steve Nash made? No. And if they were right or if they are wrong, we're not going to be talking about it. Last night they showed their hand. They showed their cards. They're showing that their priority is getting to the playoffs healthy. Their priority is becoming the champions. That's it. They have a lot of experience on that bench. They got a lot of experience on that team. From KD, you're talking about the playoffs, James Harden, Kyrie Irving. You have champions on that team. Mike D'Antoni, we're talking about 2-time coach of the year. Like this whole conversation around experience and rookie coach, it means nothing really, because this team is sitting right there where they need to be. Who would have thought that this team that traded for James Harden in January, the beginning of January, will be sitting 2 in the East? Nobody thought that. They thought this was going to be an implosion. That's what everybody thought. So for them to be sitting right here says a lot. Walking away from that game, I think they should be more confident than ever, Wilds. When you go down to the wire with Nick is saying the best team in the East, and you're without James Harden, you're without KD, Kyrie checks out 8 minutes to go in the game, they're down 22, and then a JV team bring you back. Like, you should walk away from that game more confident.
I guess so. I think I agree with Nick here, where the idea that we're always looking towards tomorrow, we're always looking for the playoffs. Well, there's a little carpe diem that I think the Nets need. There is something to say for the consistency of a squad. And Sarah, I want to show you a graphic on how many lineups this team has used. Last night, DeAndre Jordan, hey, welcome back to the starting lineup. You got a bunch of DNPs. The teams that switch up their lineup this often are, for lack of a better term, terrible. The Nets are still good. Now, on the plus side, you can say optimistically, imagine how good they're going to be once they get their real starting five. On the pessimistic side, it's like, when you get to playoffs, you have the least experienced and cohesive team in the entire league. Do you fall on the optimistic side or the pessimistic side, Sarah?
I think regardless of group, I would fall on the optimistic side, just because this to me is an example of the versatility. And to go to Nick's point about this being the most important game, there's still 17 games left here in the regular season and a difference of one game. But I think overall, the perspective that you bring up, Kevin, which I think is a really good one and an interesting one, it shows to me the amount of players that have gotten a chance to get a feel for how this team wants to play. And I think the fact that you have the significant amount of games missed by your most talented players, your most impactful players, and the players that you expect to carry you throughout the postseason, to me, that bodes well for the confidence of this group. And as Brandon said, who do you think is coming out of that game feeling better? Do you think Philadelphia feels good that they had to?
I agree.
Doc Rivers is excited about the fact that he had to put Joel Embiid, and Ben Simmons thought that they were done for the night. And so I think there's the opposite side of things, of the way a group feels and doing what they are doing in a rhythm.
So I agree with a lot of that. And I think Philly has to hate the way they closed the second quarter, the third quarter, and the last 8 minutes of the game. They made dumb play after dumb play, and at the end they could not manufacture a basket. But there's 2 points here that I think are worth drilling down on for a moment. One is, Sarah and Brandon, the point that I hear is they're focused on the postseason. I agree. The point I am trying to make is they are confusing themselves if they think there is any world that exists where a path to a championship is easier if you have to play Milwaukee in round 2 versus the Hawks, the Celtics, the Knicks, any of those mediocre teams that are going to be the 1 seed round 2 opponent. And the other thing is, I don't want to be rude here. I hear Nash said it about Kyrie. You're worried about getting healthy. Kyrie wasn't out with an injury. Kyrie was out on his paid time off, his personal leave. And so now
but the reality,
Kyrie's personal leave. Hold on, wait. Let me ask the question. Kyrie's personal days are now bleeding into his working days? Like Kyrie took time away from the team, and now he's also you can't use him, reinsert him into a fourth quarter? Like that ain't great. Because maybe I missed the injury, but he wasn't on the injury report.
Well, let me ask you a question, Nick. Is the sentiment through the players, around the league that the 72 games is a little bit too much? That they feel like they're overworked? And this whole load. Yes. Okay, so that's what's happening right now. Teams and players are getting creative on how to load management. We know that the league frowns upon it. They're starting to penalize teams who do it. But now they got to get creative with it. That's all you're seeing. This team is doubling down on the postseason. They're thinking about big picture. They're not worrying about playing against the Bucks and Miami. Miami? Are you kidding me? And then you're talking about the tiebreaker. You're a guy who loves stats. I'll just finish here. You're a guy who loves stats. You always talk about probability, okay? Since 1985, the number 1 seed was determined by a tiebreaker 4 times. So what's the probability of that? Like, there's 17 games left, like Sarah talked about. There's so much ball. We're not going to. It's not. This game is not even going to count. It's not even going to matter.
Okay. Well, I vehemently disagree with you on that. And you're right. Since 1985, only 4 games have been determined by the tiebreaker, or 4 seasons. But far more have been determined by 1 game. And this, if the Nets lose the East, either finishing with the same record as the Sixers or 1 game behind them, this game was the swing game. This game was the difference. And Sarah, you're around the team. If this game was close, Kyrie wasn't on some minutes restriction, right? Like, if Kyrie, if they don't go down 22 in the 4th and check him out, he was ready to play the full game. And then they took him out because everyone thought the game was over. And then they chose not to put him back in. Like, he was available for the full game if need be, as far as I understand it.
That was my understanding. But I think it goes back to the big picture of why he was taken out, the timing he was taken out. And Nick, these are things I don't know. It's a part of the decision making of how the course of that game went. But I don't think for this Brooklyn team, it's just about looking to the postseason. However, look at the fact that they have had so many players miss so much time. They have got to be focused on making sure on the day-to-day that they have guys in their peak form, that as they finish off this season, there's no hiccups in terms of injury. And I think that was more of the factor of Kyrie's minutes, where he was at after a few minutes, after that final stretch of the game. So I think overall, and I wouldn't necessarily say a 37-9 night it is bad impacts from being out due to personal reasons, taking care of a family matter.
And Sarah, the biggest tell of where their focus is when talking about the big picture was watching them on the sideline. This looked like a football preseason game where the stars are on the sideline with their ball caps on and sunflower seeds in their mouth. That's what their focus was last night. Those guys were just cheering on their team.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.